Hello, and welcome to the Alchemist Inkwell.
This is your spiritual podcast for grounded people.
I'm Emily.
And I'm KristaLyn. And I was almost like, and I'm Emily. I am not. I am brain fried though. A lot of us this week, and I'm just going to kick off, by the way, I'm an astrologer. If you haven't listened to this podcast, we are in the midst of this weird like conjunction T-square Saturn throwing in a little bit of assistance with a sextile situation this week. So we have like Mars and Venus opposing each other, and they're both in their own terms, which makes them, according to Maternus, who is an ancient astrologer who wrote at the fall of Rome. Maternus said that if a planet is in their own terms, which is a little section of a sign, they are as strong as if they were in their own sign, so domicile. So even though Mercury is in Gemini, he's in his own terms, so he would necessarily be as strong as he is in Scorpio or Aries, except that he's also retrograde. Mm-hmm. And then Venus is in Sagittarius, where she doesn't really have a whole lot of support, but she's in her own terms. So she might be as strong. And so these two who are not at home, kind of out in public, posturing, are also opposing each other.
I was just going to say, not at home and whiny about it.
Yeah. Well, do you know what it reminds me of? The image that comes to mind, if you've ever seen Miss Congeniality, is when Sandra Bullock is doing her talent thing with the cups, but then identifies someone in the audience that she's like 90% sure has a gun and just dives into the audience. That is the kind of energy that I really feel coming from this tension of like, you know, I'm doing my thing over here. It's in public and I'm not at home, but I'm doing something I do. That person in the audience is doing something they do too, because I think it was a lighter or something. Yeah. But I'm going to attack you anyway because I feel like there's something. Yeah, we should. It's a great movie. And in the midst of that, Mercury is squaring Neptune. So there's this confusion in communication already with the tension between the I'm right, you're wrong. And there does seem to be a desire to be more right than whoever you're up against this week. So I want to encourage everybody, aside, it's not a new moon, it's not a full moon, it's not anything like that, but it is a dynamic pattern going on. And it's really important to remember to be seeking truth in a discussion, a conversation, or even an intellectual argument, and not to be seeking domination or being more right than someone else, because otherwise you're just perpetuating some kind of weird thing that's going to last a lot longer than it should. So if you can get curious in conversations and look for what's true rather than trying to just justify your opinion the entire time, you're going to find a lot more interesting stuff this week that's going to help you grow, expand, and even deepen your spiritual connection to things and to other people. So I don't know why I wasn't planning on saying that, but it needed to be said, I guess.
It's so funny that you say that though, because like before we got on call together, I was thinking about what my energetic forecast for the week was going to be. And I was like looking at that energy, and the whole thing I kept hearing was like communication. We need to just watch our communication, like transformation. I think there's a cool transformative energy to this week, not such dynamic transformation where you're like, wow, I'm an entirely different person come next Monday. Like that's not what I'm feeling. But I do feel like there's a cool, like this upcoming weekend is like some cool transformative sort of perspective shift stuff, which is again, communication. And I'm all for that. But that was the big thing I got to, is just like, hey, maybe don't jump to conclusions. Maybe we know assume this week.
Yeah, don't jump to conclusions is the perfect way of putting that.
Yeah. So obviously that does need to be said, because that is a huge theme right now.
Yeah.
For everybody.
So there you go. No idea why that had to like. By the way, this is your spiritual podcast for grounded people. Now that we've grounded you in the details, let's talk about fun stuff, like cozy stuff.
Yeah, we were talking about
it's another great expression of Mercury and Neptune, cozy fiction.
Yeah. I would also say too, the other way that that's kind of showing up for people, and I know you mentioned this is a theme for me personally, and then this is a theme also for clients I've been working with. Redoing spaces has been such a trend right now, and not like a trend as in like, oh, it's a hip thing to redo your space. It's like people feel this need that their space is no longer fitting. It feels like wearing old clothes, and you need to get it off of you immediately and wash it and make it prettier and better and feel more like you or who you want to be. So that is a huge trend right now too. So if you're like, all of a sudden I need to feng shui in my living room. Yeah. Yes.
Oh yeah. Dan and I were looking into Marie Kondo because we want to downsize. You know, we just moved, so we're acutely aware of our inventory. and of how much we thought we had pared down. And it's like, well, we want to do more. We want to, Dan pursues a more Taoist lifestyle. And I 1000% support that. So I'm really interested in helping with that. And there's a certain minimalism that comes along with it. And I'm also looking at what I had posted to social media, because I think there was a transit this week specifically. I think it's Venus. It is the Venus opposite Mars and sextile Saturn situation is exact on December 1st. So we're just in the applying energy of that right now, but you can already feel it. And so Saturn is like, hey, hey girl, to Venus, get your act together. And Venus is like, but Venus in Sagittarius is like boho, global, like clutter core, right? It's the having a lot of things makes me feel cozy, which is totally fine. And Saturn is like, okay, right? But Saturn's like, okay, is it clutter core or is it just clutter? Like, be real with yourself. Yeah.
Mine is clutter core. It is just what it is. I will show you my bookshelf. It's not cluttered with stuff I don't want, but there are many a thing on it.
Yes. And see, that's a thing. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I recently got a bunch of baskets for various areas of my house because everyone in my house is neurodivergent, basically, except for my poor eldest daughter, who's very holistic. And I feel so bad for her because she's just surrounded with all of us. Anyway, so where stuff gathers, now there's a basket for it to gather in. Instead of trying to make its home in other places, it just now, wherever it's gathered, there's now a basket. Yep. Which has been really freeing. So I highly recommend that.
We have about 3 of those.
Yeah. And it's just really helpful. Like put a basket where the mess is. It's great.
And when you get that breeze of energy, that's where you go.
Right. Well, instead of being like, its home is now over here where it doesn't naturally end up falling, like allow your habits to be beneficial, I guess.
Yeah.
So that's been fun. But yeah, being a Venus ruled person, clutter core makes me happy.
Yeah.
The inside of every room looks like the inside of my head. That's how it always feels.
Wow. You are a Gemini sun as well. Yeah. That's funny. Yeah. Yeah. I always find it really cool that you're Venus ruled and I'm Mars ruled. So we have like this really cool balance thing.
It's a fun dynamic. It really is.
Yeah.
Also, like Venus and Mars are buddies. They're just like, they're the buddies that go and gossip together.
You have no idea. There is one source. There's actually, I think it's also Maternus. There are several sources that tell you like how the planets actually get along. And majority, there's like only one source. And again, I think it's Maternus. That's like, everybody hates Mars, but Venus tolerates Mars. And so like Mars has one buddy and it's Venus, even though they're, kind of cat and dog, which is really, it's funny to me. So yes, can support that fact.
Yeah. The game, the Phoenix Rising game does a really good representation of that.
Yeah.
How they have like a pick on you sort of dynamic.
Yeah. It's the frenemies thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I appreciate.
Yeah. One of my closest friends, our whole thing is just arguing with each other because it's so fun and like stimulating. And yeah, it works.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of friends that I argue with, but that's okay. One of my favorite animes, which is Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Mage. Maid, not mage. Maid. I love it, by the way. If you want a cozy anime, 10,000% that. I love it with all of my being. I've watched it through many times. It's precious, but so precious. But they have a whole episode where they're finally close enough, like the 2 main characters are close enough to fight, basically, and they get in like this argument over who makes the best food, and it's really cute. And then they realize, wait a second, we're fighting, but it's like it's an okay thing that we're fighting, and like that being close enough to argue is a thing. And I just really appreciate that concept in a lot of ways. It's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Segue, we're talking about cozy stuff.
Yeah. If you haven't picked up on it already, we just haven't actually gotten around to pinning it down. Today's topic is cozy fiction, which anime is. Also books are, movies are. So it's also kind of like your comfort show or book or, other show, anime.
Yeah. So we were talking about how we haven't done an episode really dedicated to like energy of book stuff kind of in a while.
Mm-hmm.
And right now there's a huge trend in cozy fantasy stories in specifically kind of coming to the forefront. That high fantasy, though it's great for sometimes people right now, I think are overloaded. And that feels like just taking way too much of a bite of something.
Mm-hmm.
So cozy fantasy is kind of at the forefront where it's comfortable and it's, low stakes and just nice in that way. And I think there's a lot of stories coming out or that have been around for a while that really fit that description. So we wanted to recommend some of those to you or talk about like the energetic impact of having cozy fantasy and cozy fiction stories for you, because genuinely it's really important and it's a very healing, comfortable energy to experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, for a while there, you had the time or the era where Hunger Games was a really big topic and everybody was looking for the epic fantasy or the dystopian or the urban fantasy. And right now, I'm going to just say it, we're living too much of that to be able to escape into it.
Capitalist dystopian hellscape.
So I think it's really cool that right now you can, again, and we have always said this about high vibe fiction. It's in writing the High Vibe Hero's Journey book that I wrote. You can gauge the collective conscious based on what we're consuming. And right now, like I've noticed two things. One of them is cozy stuff, which is great. That's coming up. So you can tell we're looking for the wholesome. We're trying to bring that back into our energy. We're saying, hey, I don't have enough of this. I need this to balance myself. So we're consuming it in our entertainment. That's awesome. That's energy healing in and of itself, which is what in the Forgotten Storytellers we believe books are. By the way, pitches are open. Feel free to pitch us if you have a book that you think can also heal people. We would love to look at it. But also on the flip side, even the scary movies are just being hilarious. Last week, I went to see a movie and like, I don't usually do scary movies. This was more on the thriller side. And there was something intellectual about it. So I was like, okay, I can hold space with this. This is fine. It won't keep me up at night with images that will haunt me. Because that's a thing for all of the intuitive people out there. I'm sure you get what I mean. So we went to see The Menu, which is basically Chef's Table meets I Know What You Did Last Summer. And so the whole thing, but it was the way it was written was so witty and funny. And even by the end, like the people have come to these conclusions and relationships and all of this stuff. And it's just like, wow. And you just take stock of like, how am I treating my fellow person who works in a restaurant, person who works at a bookstore, like how am I appreciating where I'm at? How are the people that are at different levels than me appreciating it? And like, what is the world looking like in these hierarchies that we've developed for ourselves and how necessary are those? And then there's this one we're excited to see. I'm not usually a violence person, but maybe it's my Mars coming out because it's got a lot of pent up stuff with Mars being retrograde right now. But Violent Night, have you seen the ads for this yet? It's Santa basically coming in and one of his people that's on his nice list is being held hostage and her family are being held hostage. He comes down the chimney and interrupts that and decides to go basically die hard on them. And the writing though, it's like Santa on the walkie-talkie with the little girl. And she's like, and what do we do to people who are on the naughty list? And he's like, give them a bag of coal, and then goes to do stuff. And it's the guy who plays Hopper from Stranger Things. So there's this pushy, wholesome energy about it that is able to carry in, even though it's like even in our thrillers, we want something that makes us laugh. We need that decompression right now.
I heard it referred to as Deadpool is now a genre.
Yes. Yeah. That's very accurate for how this has become. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which fair, like, and I think a lot of like even the big fantasy epics, like the time of like Lord of the Rings films where there really isn't a lot of levity. Like I love Lord of the Rings deeply. It will be on the sleeve. There's a tattoo planned for Lord of the Rings because I love it very, very much so. But there's not a lot of outside of the first movie or The Hobbit, the book. there's not a lot of like light and funny and that sort of thing. I mean, Merry and Pippin are there obviously, but like that's kind of it. Now it's like if you look at the Avengers trilogy, I mean, I know it's sci-fi versus fantasy, but like that's kind of the closest thing we have right now. All of the Marvel stuff is interwoven with very deep humor and joy and like those fun human things. And that's kind of what we require right now. Movies that focus too much on just the heavy aren't doing great. And that's kind of why.
Yeah. And you can even see in the Lord of the Rings series that's out right now, Rings of Power, they do focus more on the little moments, you know, they're Harfoots instead of hobbits. I think it's the early version. I haven't read on this yet, so I've watched the series, but I haven't done the reading for it yet. But they're really focused on the relationships. They're focused on the dynamics, the people, and how much, you know, even their mental states. You can see people concerned for other people and, you know, focused on that. And that's so important. And I think it's really cool because, again, what high vibe fiction does is it gives you a feeling to emulate. If you've ever watched something and then afterwards you're like living as that character, I can't tell you how many times I would watch Peter Pan as a kid and then go jumping around feeling like I held the air for just a little bit longer. We're doing the same thing after watching these movies. We're holding on to that vibration or that feeling of wholesomeness, caring, being in relationships where we're seen and can see, you know, that vulnerability that's safe or at least supported and stood up for and cherished. And that's so important. And again, it can happen in a thriller. It can happen in a, like my favorite book ever right now, So This Is Ever After. It can happen in a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. And that is so important, I think, especially right now. And I think another thing that it's saying is we're more awake to the fact that we need this than we thought. It's coming into the realm of consciousness because it's already in the unconscious. So as we're heading towards that big shift that we're talking about in March, that we did a whole episode about a couple episodes ago on this podcast, we're bringing that in already. And that is, you know, a Piscean energy too, which is comfort. It can be. It's, you know, very much that therapy, self-undoing in the highest sense being self-care.
Also, you can talk to your comfort characters. Like they exist in energetic reality. Like you can chat with them the same way you would with like a deity or a spirit that's out there or whatever you want to work with. Like by all means, call in your comfort characters. I have done this so many times to get advice on things.
Oh my gosh.
And they are real people or, you know, real beings that exist out there. You can absolutely do so. And it's super important. And also like you also see this trend in gaming right now, like in a big way. Couple ones that I've just been playing in the last month. Both are particularly cozy. The first one is Dreamlight Valley, which is like a Disney adult game, 100%, but it's like Animal Crossing, but with Disney, and you're like rescuing characters, and it's really cute, but there's no stopping point. Like with Animal Crossing, you run out of stuff to do. Not the case in the slightest. And there's no dailies, so you don't have an obligation to show up to the game every day. So all of that combined, and it's so comforting, especially when I have a lot of anxiety, which I've been having a ton of anxiety for this past month, ton of PTSD. So if I can just go into this world where I'm really comforted, it's lovely. And the characters will like reassure you about stuff, and it's just precious. And I love that energy. And that's a new one that's come out very, very recently. Another one, and this is just a trend that I've noticed. I've been playing the new Pokemon game. So I'm playing Pokemon Scarlet right now. And I've played 4 or 5 Pokemon games at this point. 5, I think. And usually like there is a storyline, but it's not super storyline-y. This one has much more of a storyline than I've seen in any Pokemon game ever. And it is really, it's like, it made me cry. Like a Pokemon game had a storyline that made me emotional. Like that is different. And that is, again, that response of like, hey, we need to feel things, but we need to feel, and it was literally like power of friendship kind of stuff. But not in a weird Pokemon way where it's like, this person's now your best friend. It was very authentic and sweet, and it was about the love between a person and their Pokemon. It was just really cool, and I really appreciated it. And there's like also a storyline of kind of about bullying and our responses to that, and that's getting resolved at the same time. So it's really cool. It's not my favorite Pokemon game ever, but it's really cool, and I highly recommend that. But again, just really cozy energy that makes you feel held and seen and understood in a way that isn't reminding you of how the world is awful. because that is the other aspect, like high fantasy, which I love. Some of my favorite books of all time are high fantasy, big stakes, the world is ending, whatever. But it's hard to read that right now. It's also hard to read series right now for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people are finding a lot of frustration in that, because people are trying to dive into a series because this series is recommended or whatever. And it's really, really hard to get past book one in a series at this point in time. So just know it's kind of what's going on in the collective energy. It's not you. If you're like, I want to read these books, but the series is really, it's hard to have a series. Yes, it's hard for a series right now. The energy is very much shifting to standalone comfort work. And that doesn't mean that if you have an idea for a series, you should not write it. Absolutely, that's not it at all. I'm just saying for this literal next 2 months, that's the energy we're sitting in.
Yeah. And I think also even shorter stories are coming into vogue. Like if I see a book the size of Babel, which is one I read a little while ago, and I did that on well, I also just finished the Odyssey. So like been doing a lot of long ones. So maybe I'm just a little burned out, but also like if you show me about 12 hours on an audiobook, I'm like, okay. But if I'm going to sit down and read a book like this thick, that's perfect for me. That's perfect. That's a good book. It feels like a book that I can spend some time lost in, but I'm not going to be so lost that I can't get back because I'll never make it to the end kind of thing. And I think Cozy does that really well, where they're here to tell you a story. They're not here to get you all wrapped up in drama and like too much intrigue. And it's just really important. Like even I'm always reading ancient astrology alongside whatever I'm reading. Right now, what I'm focused on and working through bit by bit is Rhetorius, which is literally only this long. It's really dense, but it's not one of the longer ones. I'm working my way towards Valens. Anybody out there who's astrologically inclined, Valens just released with a new translation, and I'm really excited about it. So
so funny. I don't do a lot of nonfiction reading unless it's about Rome currently, which constantly for me forever, I guess. Now it's so funny too, because like obviously I've talked about a lot in writing Cresta. It's almost done. But so many other characters from different parts of Rome and times in Rome are now coming through of like, hey, this story. So I guess I'm just gonna write some Roman fiction for a while. It's where we're kind of at.
That sounds fun.
I don't know why, but here we are. But yeah, so I understand that too. That being said, I think a lot of times now nonfiction books are also leaning towards more narrative style nonfiction, which I really appreciate. It's almost like the memoir style, but even when it's about time periods and, you know, different historical things, there is a lot of like story narration kind of coming in to some nonfiction spaces. And I value that very highly because it's much more lifted, higher vibrational energy.
Yeah, it's trying to communicate to you, not trying to talk down to you. Like one of the things that I really appreciated about this this translation of the Odyssey was the one, hang on, if I could spell correctly. I want to get this right because I want to recommend it to people. Apparently it came out a couple of years ago. Emily Wilson. This is the translation done by Emily Wilson. And the whole first 4 hours is just an introduction. The whole first 4 hours of the audio. Actually, it's like, I think it is 4 hours because I was listening to this on the drive from Pennsylvania to Virginia when I was moving, and most of the drive was the introduction. However, some of the points that Emily makes is people who have translated before will try to be like super intellectual in their translations. And she was like, you're reading a story. They didn't write it super dry and whatever and stuffy. I'm not going to write it super dry and stuffy for you. I'm not going to translate it that way. I want you to be able to get into the story. And because it is very like, they didn't do the show not tell thing back then. It was mostly just tell. So there was a lot of telling and retelling and let me list to you what everything that just happened here and all that stuff. But it was more colloquial. It was more like, oh, you're talking to me and I can pick up what you're throwing down without putting too much effort into it. And I'm someone who has a fascination with words and like complicated words and interesting words. But when I'm listening to a book for fun words are fun to use for sure. And we talk about this in the Forgotten Storytellers too. I love learning new words, but there is a beautiful balance between flowing, talking to the reader and using really cool words and being so dense because you're trying to show them how smart you are. It comes from a different intention. And I think a lot of nonfiction is, look how smart I am. I'm writing this nonfiction book. And we don't need it to be that way. If you just write as you talk, I'm going to understand better and your work will be more successful.
Yeah,
hot
absolutely.
take, I guess.
I agree.
Yeah.
I fully agree. So I don't think it's a hot take. I think it makes a lot of sense. I also think that is huge. That's why it's so important to have many different types of voices in publishing spaces. Also, if you're not following how Barnes and Noble is currently shitting on marginalized authors, please look into it. It's really, really bad. Please boycott them as much as possible. I'm not even remotely joking. Buy from small booksellers, please, because look up what's going on with Bloodmarked. Let's just go that way. Look up what's going on with Bloodmarked, which is the sequel to Legendborn, which is a #1 New York Times and international bestseller that even has a Barnes & Noble exclusive edition that they're currently not really stocking at all because the author is, the only reason anyone can figure out is it's because the author is Black. So I've done a lot of reading on this in the last couple days because I'm ticked. And so please look into that and let's fight this energetically with everybody, because this is not okay.
Well, I'm excited for Bloodmark because I really enjoyed Legendborn a lot. But if you're out there and you're like, well, where do I go? Because I shop online and I don't want to support Amazon. I don't want to support Barnes and Noble. Bookshop.org. That's where I ordered Genderqueer. I got the special edition and all that stuff. It was from a Virginia-based bookstore, and they sent it to me. Independent bookstores all over the place are able to access you, and you are able to access them from bookshop.com. There are other options as well, but I know that's the one that was recommended to us by Betty's Pages.
Yeah, so highly recommend that one for sure. Or, you know, if you have a local bookshop, just go in and ask for the books you want. They will order them. Like they will stock them in the next run. That's how local bookshops work. If you're like, hey, I really want these books, I keep looking for them, I don't want to support Amazon, Barnes and Noble, they will support you that way. Yeah, so just a little plug there because I'm pissed and I've done a lot of reading and research and watched a lot of videos over the last couple of days about this topic because it's a special interest of mine. Is equality in publishing and publishing in general. So
well, and us with our publishing house, the thing that we've done with Ninth House Publishing is we have created a space for something that we know is next phase publishing. But we need publishing to catch up with that and make it possible and doable in the reality. So both of us have been really on top of what's happening in publishing. When does that moment of being able to say, hey, there we can fit and get in on the edge and the crest of that wave. And right now you can see it is, the tide is pulling out for the tsunami to come in soon.
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting. So touching back on cozy stuff, because now we went not cozy, sorry.
Sorry, but this is why we need cozy.
This is why we need cozy stuff. So I want to talk about some of my favorite cozy books and recommend those in general. Anything by TJ Klune.
Yes.
Just going to start there. Under the Whispering Door, House in the Cerulean Sea, The Extraordinaries. Any of those, incredible. The Extraordinaries are, it's a series, it's 3 books, but they're not huge, they're not too much, they're short little books, and they are so unbelievably laugh out loud funny, and it is taking the superhero trope and completely flipping it on its head with a beautiful queer high school narrative, and it makes me so happy. House in the Cerulean Sea, I will talk about that book until the cows come home. I've read it like 4 times now. It's amazing. It is a wonderful warm blanket of a book about a magical orphanage, and it is just precious. And then Under the Whispering Door is very much a cozy take on death.
It is though.
It's you go to a tea shop when you die. What happens? That's the book.
Yeah. I think there's actually an anime coming out about that right now too, where someone is basically the coffee shop that people go to as they're learning to pass. It's kind of like Spiritfarer, which is a cozy game I highly recommend. Cozy Grove is another thing where you're helping you're at Cozy Grove, which is an island of ghost bears, and you're helping them remember so that they can, ascend. And it's really adorable. As far as some book options go, seconding TJ Klune to the cows come home. A couple other ones that I've read this year was Carry On by Rainbow Rowell, was pretty like cozy, fun kind of thing.
It's so quick. You read it so quick. It's lacking. I wanted more.
Yeah.
To it. Also, the
better.
second one falls real flat.
I didn't even.
The first one is so good.
I was okay with the first one. So This Is Ever After by F.T. Lukens will forever. Like, I literally, if you're here, I have the illuminated book. Like, this is my new favorite book. I recommend it forever. Whatever you're looking for, this will help you out. And on that note, also, Red, White, and Royal Blue, which had its moment more last year, but it's Casey McQuiston did Red, White, and Royal Blue. It's the only one of theirs that I've read so far. But
the other one of theirs really is good too. What's it called? They have another book. It's about someone who is stuck on the subway for all eternity. It's really cute. I highly recommend it. It has some holes, but it's a great little like escape from reality.
One Last Stop.
Thank you. That one.
Yeah.
But I, again, also highly recommend Red, White, and Royal Blue, especially if you'd like to live in an alternative timeline for a minute. If you really wish the 2016 time had been a different thing and want to live from then on, this is the book.
And then I have two more that I think might be hot takes, but I would say Circe by Madeline Miller is this really empowered feminine cozy book, because it's really like Circe written as a kitchen witch, which is really great. And just really taking that side of that whole exchange that she has gone through. And then also, if you want to dive into Greek mythology a little bit more, but you don't want the density of the typical stuff, Mythos by Stephen Fry not only will give you the mythos, does it in an entertaining way. He basically, and I recommend the audiobook because he does it himself. He wrote it and he does the audio. And he will walk you through in theatrics the entire creation to hero era. And he'll do it with giving context on, like, at this time, culturally, they did this. That kind of relates to what's going on now. So you get these kind of asides from him, and he is very aware. Stephen Fry, if you're unfamiliar, is also, many of us know his voice from the Harry Potter audiobooks. Lots of us listen to the kids. But he also is quite interesting, the host of that TV show. But anyway, I recommend this so much because he does such a good job. I actually know mythology now. I was able to take it in because it wasn't so monotone that I couldn't actually be interested. So especially if you're neurodivergent, this book will actually hold your interest enough so that you can take this even deeper. And then when you read other stuff, you'll be able to relate it back to this. So it's a really great foundation for getting into myth as a special interest, if that's something you're for.
Yeah. Love that. Fully support that. Absolutely. Couple other ones for me. One I finished reading this month, The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. It's The Sound of Music, but with witches and no war. And it's cozy and lovely. It also is a holiday book. Like, it's not advertised as a holiday book. It is a Christmas time, winter solstice book, and it's just beautiful. I love it very, very much. It's definitely, it's a keeper. It's a good one. I really recommend that one too. The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy, talked about that a little while ago. I also think that's very cozy because it has a really cool approach to death and caring, and it's very neat. I also just finished Legends and Lattes, which I know is a really hot button book on Book Talk right now. And I do want to say, most popular Book Talk books I dislike. I have read enough of them now where I can say with confidence, most of them I completely dislike, whether that is high fantasy, whether that is just, contemporary fiction, whether that is, I've read a lot of them. I don't like them. I don't like them at all. That being said, this one is one that deserves its praise that it's getting. Also, the author, it's Travis Baldree. He is an audiobook narrator. That is his job. He has narrated hundreds of audiobooks. This is the first book, at least that I could find, that he's really written. He indie published it, and it has now reached the New York Times bestseller list, which is incredible. It is like a 6-hour audiobook. He narrates it himself. So the voices that he heard from his characters as he wrote it are now the ones you get to hear because he's narrating it. It's great. It is so lovely. How do you open up a coffee shop in a fantasy world where no one knows what coffee is? That's that's the book. And it's so pleasant. Highly recommend that one.
Other authors who have been doing cozy fiction since before it was a thing, Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, both of them have tones that are very cozy. Like they'll take on, American Gods and things aside a little bit. If you take in Good Omens,
I was just going to say, we're talking Good Omens, Neil Gaiman, or the Norse Pantheon book he did.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So Neil Gaiman can get pretty dark, but if you've even it's not The Cemetery. Is it The Cemetery? Or The Graveyard. The Graveyard by Neil Gaiman is short. It's The Graveyard Book is what it's called. And it's rather high vibe, even though it takes place in a graveyard. And it's this boy who's alive that's being raised by all the spirits there. And, kind of what happens in that case. There's not a lot of stakes to it. And you're just sort of like, wait, what is that? What's happening? And you're just following him along, and it's adorable. And you're getting it mostly from his perspective. Good Omens, though, is very feel good. And it really takes the whole like battle between good and evil thing and just makes it light, gives you a friendship that's unlikely, but just precious. And I'm so excited that there's going to be a season 2 because I personally also really enjoy David Tennant and Martin Sheen. So it'll be really cool. But the book is also very good.
Nice. Last one I can think of is A Sorcery of Thorns. It's a standalone. Really good. It's about a librarian, but all the books in the library are actually grimoires and they come to life.
As they would.
And I mean, there's a little bit of high stakes there, but there's a demon that's a kitty cat that you absolutely fall in love with. Let's just put it that way. So pretty cozy, pretty lovely, warm sort of energy. You don't get left on a cliffhanger. There's an ice skating scene. Like it's just
that's awesome.
That sort of energy. Also cozy graphic novels, if you're interested in those. I adore the Tea Dragons books. They're amazing. The Prince and the Dressmaker. Love it. It's so cozy. You can read it in a day. All of my children have read it now. It's wonderful. It's queer. It's beautiful. I just love it so much. It's a great one. And what's the one? Hold on, where'd my phone go? I need to I've been following this from the time it was not even a web comic yet. And I just love it so very, very much. Where is it? Hold on. I will get there. Oh, Punderworld. It's a Persephone and Hades retelling, which usually I stray away from, but it's so cute and it's a graphic novel and it's so
that just got added to my list because I'm guessing there are puns.
There are puns. It's so cute. It's beautifully illustrated, like absolutely like cartoon television show level of animation. Well, speaking, if you want a cozy cartoon television show, have you watched Tangled, the series?
Yes. Oh my God, Varian is my life.
Yeah, it is. All of the original cast came back, plus a ton of Broadway voices. Like Jeremy Jordan is Varian, and it's like, what?
His songs. Have you seen the whole thing?
I've watched the whole thing.
His song in the last season. Oh my God, they are on my playlist.
It's so good. And I would consider it cozy because it's still like a Disney princess feel, but it's not.
And there's so much to explore, so much gray area and like redemption and so good. Yes.
Also, I am currently reading Light from Uncommon Stars, which is the friendship between someone who made a deal with the devil, a alien, and a queer runaway violinist. And it's just, so far, it's been really cozy and lovely. It's written kind of weird, so I'm going to hesitate to recommend it necessarily. But so far, it's been great. So I just want to highlight that too. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So highly recommend if you feel like the need to be cozy right now. That's really what we're all kind of going through because everything has been really dense. and very intense and very fast, not fast moving necessarily, but fast feeling is what I'm going to say.
There's been a lot of pressure. I've been having the feeling, and again, this really plays into my form of neurodivergence. I'm always feeling rushed, even when I'm not being rushed. So one of the things my lovely spouse has done is he'll say, like, there is no rush, take your time, we're doing this. And that's been really helpful. So as a technique, if you're in this energy, that's also really helpful to just remind yourself and give yourself reminders that there is no rush. Cozy fiction will also help with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Cozy board games, also a thing. Yeah. Just going to throw that out there. We just got Takedo and I can't wait to play it, which is basically a game of who gets to be the happiest. Like the winner is the person who's the happiest at the end. Yeah. That's it.
We played tacos versus burritos over Thanksgiving. And it's basically whoever has the most appealing burrito wins by the end of it.
Love it.
Well, unless you're a taco, then you can have an appealing taco. Yeah.
Okay. There's some weird suggestiveness to that I just want to point out.
Yeah, I didn't pick up on that nuance. I still don't. So it's okay. I'll stay in the dark on that one. I prefer it. Yeah.
I appreciate it though. I really appreciate it.
Now I'm embarrassed because I have no idea. For anybody else out there who's like me. Yeah.
You're good. I love it. It's great. Yeah. We've been playing Puns of Anarchy a lot, where you get 4 cards and you have to make puns out of them with a whiteboard marker, basically. It's fun. Chris and I played it together. That one's a great one. Also, Hero to Slay. Fabulous. It's kind of like a very pared down Magic the Gathering, but with fuzzy animals. I'm going to put it that way.
It's adorable. Yeah.
So yeah, all of those ones are really good too if you want just like cozy activities as well. Yeah, couple of quick things before we sign off too. Obviously that was our bookend episode. We talked a lot about what we've been reading, so that's what we've been reading. Please feel free to share with us what you've been reading. If you have any book recommendations that are cozy or otherwise, we still read other stuff. It's not like we're just doing cozy. We just wanted to talk to you all about that because that's what the energy is really needing right now. So just highlight that if you're feeling that cuddly space. I have my Hermes the hamster on my lap this whole time because he's cozy. So yeah, totally understand. We do have some really cool topics coming up that the patrons in our Patreon get to vote on, and we're really excited about those. If you want to join the Patreon, our first tier is like literally $5 a month. It's not a lot, and then it kind of goes up from there, but it's really affordable, and we get to do a lot of fun stuff with you all. We get to do bonus videos for the top tier. You guys can vote on episode topics, you can ask questions, you get the episode early. There's a bunch of fun stuff in there. We'd love to have you be part of the Patreon. Also, Forgotten Storyteller pitches are still open. Yay. Yes. We're so excited about it. Our next cohort starts the first week of January. So you do have a little bit of time, but that being said, we do fill up pretty quick. So you definitely want to submit your pitch. If you have an idea for a fiction book, or if you know someone who has an idea for a fiction book, but they don't know how to write it, they don't know what their steps are, it's just a cool idea that they've had kicking around in their head. We cannot stress enough, like we've talked about this extensively, this next cohort is so perfectly timed for the shifts that are going to be happening in publishing. This next cohort is going to be hyper speed launched into success because of that. It's really, really cool, the energy that's coming up. And if you want to take advantage of that, it's time to pitch it up. Send us your messy story idea. It's a quick little form. It's literally like 4 sentences. And then we tune in and see if it's aligned. And then we meet with you and we chat about it one-on-one. And then we go from there. Like it's very, very streamlined. It's simple. And we would love to chat with you. Also, if you have submitted a pitch, we are caught up. We have emailed everyone who has submitted a pitch. So if you've submitted a pitch and you haven't heard from us, check your junk mail because you definitely have.
As of Monday, November 28th. We are caught up in case more people are pitching throughout the week. I don't want to make you guys panic because I would.
Good point.
So yeah.
Yes. As of Monday, the 28th, we are caught up. If you submitted a pitch after that, we are not. But as of Monday, we are. Yeah. So yeah, all very, very exciting things. We're so stoked on that. Yeah. Anything else you want to bring up or chat about?
I feel like there probably should be. Available if you're interested in more about like how high vibe fiction works and you want to really understand the structure of it and stuff. You can look at the Writing the High Vibe Heroes Journey book, which is available on Amazon. You'll get a free copy of it if you join the Forgotten Storytellers. So there's that. But also on my website, I have my talk that I gave to Astromagia 2022, which is using astrology and high vibe fiction. You do not have to know astrology to be able to do this. You can actually learn it from this little workshop, but also you can see a little bit of the behind the scenes of what we do in the Forgotten Storytellers, at least the astrological component that ends up being infused into what we do to support your book. It's really cool. It's really fun. And that is available on my website if you're interested in taking a look at that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Depending upon when you hear this, I am doing a group reading because a lot of people really want readings right now, and I'm booked out 7 months. Yeah. So on December the 1st, which is when this airs for the general public, unless you're a patron, you listen to this early, I am doing a group reading. It is limited spots, but if you want to take advantage of that and you hear it in time, grab a ticket to that. You can go to my website, emilydexterpsychic.com. Yeah. And that's where it is.
I also have availability for intuitive/astrology readings on my website, help you feel really prepared for the coming year that's ahead. I know we talk about shifts a lot. We can talk about what they actually mean to you. I know one of the most common comments I get is, what does this mean for me? That's a lot for me to try to put into a comment. A reading or a consultation is how I prefer to think about them. We can really dive in and I get to focus exactly on you and your chart. So it's one of the greatest joys in my life.
A reading with Krista is amazing too, especially because I recommend coming up with like 2 or 3 questions you're looking to get answered. Bring them in, and Krista will definitely find answers for you in the chart. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, but if you're looking for a gallery reading, especially connecting with guides and loved ones and things like that, Emily is going to be providing a quality experience.
Thank you. I'm excited about it. Yeah. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening and being a part of this space. We genuinely appreciate you. Very, very thankful for you here, and thankful that you share this podcast with your community as well, like people that matter to you. Thank you for that. We've had a couple people be like, oh, so and so recommended this, and that's just really cool. So we appreciate it. Yeah. Again, we would love to hear. Oh, we have a question.
We do. Wow. Okay.
We're just going to touch on it.
We have enough time. Yeah.
Do we want to touch it? Do we want to do this one, or do we want to put it off to next week and answer next week?
Well, I think what we had discussed before the episode, spoiler, we discussed this before we jumped on to make sure we're on the same page. I think that's a really great point. I think this is happening this way for a reason. It's a great starting point.
So the question, and again, comes from our Patreon. Would you be able to talk about releasing trauma? I feel that for the most part, I can recognize them. They're traumas. I feel like for the most part, I can recognize them. But when it comes to releasing them, it seems like they just won't budge. I know it can be a long process, and process/growth is not linear, but any insight would be appreciated. Thank you. Immediately, both of us were like, examine first about what you have that's blocking you, your beliefs around why you think you can't release the trauma. Like, what is it, those reasons? Really dig into that. If you're feeling like, oh, I'm trying to release these things, they're really stuck, focus on why is it beneficial to hold on to this? Why does it not feel aligned with releasing this? That sort of thing. Why do you think it's stuck? And start by releasing those things before you move on to the bigger stuff.
Yeah. And helpful things for the next steps would be having an awareness fully of what the trauma is, being able to identify, give it a name. It's like the end of Never-Ending Story, where all she wants to know is her name. What's my name? Or give me a name. If you give it a name, you begin to understand it. You begin to relate with it. So that is something that wherever you are in your journey of releasing it or of integrating the lessons from it, you will be able to take that next step much easier. That being said, another step that I would take is when it has a name, when it's identified, you can ask, how does it serve you? Because it's there for a reason. So why does it serve me to have this reaction to whatever the trauma caused, right? So the reaction is keeping you safe. Safe from what? That kind of stuff. So when you get to the root of that, there's going to be tons to explore. There are plenty of professionals out there. I know I do energy healing. I do block pulling. Emily does a ton of energy work and block pulling. There are people out there who will be there to help you and will show up in your life or on your Google search or on your TikTok feed when the time is right, and you will be drawn to them. This is also something that as an astrologer, your transits might also be saying something about a process you're in that harkens back to traumas that relate to transits previously. So that's something we can bring into astrology as well, depending. That's super personal for you, your life, your transits. It's usually outer planet transits.
Yeah. Absolutely. But very, very much so. And on that note of giving a name, you can also think about who you were at that time and what did that person need, that version of you need, and start to give yourself now that thing. And that will also help a lot to get some of those unstuck things out of there with those traumas. And again, if you're going to give it a name, don't give it a name that causes a visceral reaction. Call it like Jimmy.
Yeah. Well, or, you know, a name that just says, this is what this is. It's to help create understanding, not necessarily to create a friend. That's an option. But I would say, you know, the name would be fear. Oh, this happened out of fear. Now I know. And now I can look at it objectively, realize what was to be afraid of, what isn't to be afraid of anymore, and reframe that memory because I have something to work with.
Yeah, not so much describing what happened. That's what I'm trying to say. Because that will be visceral and put you back in the trauma space or whatever.
Yeah.
But again, when in doubt, reach out for help. When in doubt, reach out for help. Spiritually, psychologically, whatever it feels good. But don't tackle them alone.
Yeah, you don't have to.
No. Cool. Well, that's it. We are wrapping it up then. Thank you all so much for being here. We appreciate you. Enjoy this week. Pay attention to your communication. Don't assume. And we hope that you
go make some magic.
We got it. I
Did
decided.
we?
I don't know.
You decided? Okay. I was like, I'm going to be confident regardless.